Okay, we are in the book, The Real Cause of Global Warming. And we left off on page 23. And one of the things that was covered last week was that, be evil like the gods, this deception is what Eve fell into. And this is the same thing that the world has fallen into at this time. And, they're partaking in this way, and they're convinced that they need to be evil, that they need to partake in this mixture of this righteousness and evil to actually experience or know and experience. They're trusting in experience as being the best teacher. Well, the experience not trusting in Yahweh and trusting in the gods as Satan has convinced people to do, has brought about, it's actually what's brought about the continual war, vengeance, and retaliation that we see. Because this is ultimately what the way of this following to be evil like the gods, it creates. It creates that, the deception, and it creates the confusion in the mind. And this is what we see, remember the curse of Cain is that Cain, and the world is continually going to and fro. They're continually going to and fro, ever searching for peace. They're a fugitive and a vagabond. And remember, I believe it was in the sermons on the Gulf War series where he covered that Cain would be, I shall be a vagabond, fugitive and a vagabond. And again, that means wandering to and fro, continually searching for peace. And this is what the world has done for 6,000 years, and they've always relied on the peace through strength and in the peace through their armies. And we saw the studies of the sexual assault and the sexual abuse that goes on within the military itself. And there was something that as I was reviewing and looking on page 20, it talks about in this article that was given here about the warning says that 1 in 3 women raped in the military. It's interesting that they show that survivors live with depression, shame, terror, irrationality, blaming themselves, difficulty trusting anybody again, emotional numbness, all of these psychological problems, all these psychological things that they're left with. But it's not just to the victims of these sexual assaults. It's the victims to any type of offense, any type of crime. They can actually experience this. In the type of work that I do, we see victim impact statements, and in these victim impact statements, they actually the victims have the opportunity to indicate what type of effects that they've had, that this offense, whatever it is, has had upon them. And this is almost word for word, check mark by check mark, all of those things that are listed in those victim impact statements. And it really just kind of struck me that just don't think that this is just something that can take place with these type of offenses. It's with anything. And this system, this being evil like the gods, it lends to, with the sexual abuse and stuff that was taking place within the clergy. It was actually hidden, and the priests were actually able to remain in the job or remain in the place that allowed them the frequent access to those that they could prey upon. And of course, people are taught from the beginning to, not to question their priests, not to, they're taught from an early childhood, as it says here, to respect and to believe what they tell them. And if you think about the Dark Ages and how this all came about, there was a time period when the books were not allowed, when the scriptures weren't allowed, where it was a death penalty to actually have the scriptures. And this allowed free reign for that deception to grow. Okay, and this mindset that they had of to respect them and to think that they're never going to tell me wrong. They never had anything to continue or to actually compare that with. And I can remember talking to people who, in this generation, who would actually go to church, who went to church. And I knew one person that went to, specifically, it was a Catholic church, and this individual actually brought their Bible and opened up their Bible in services. And they got chewed out for having that Bible there. So, what are you doing with this Bible in here? Well, this is the church. This is what we're studying. And they said, all you need to know is in this little booklet that we give you right here. That's all you need to know. You don't need to worry about this. So, and that should have sent red flags up, and I'm sure it probably did with this individual. But it was But if, it was, that is, again, part of that deception, part of that was allowed to grow. And one of the things that we covered also was talking about these chronic diseases, the chronic health diseases like cancer, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and they call them non-communicable. They say they can't be transferred. They may not be able to be transferred necessarily from one person to another through casual contact, through the shaking of hands, but they are communicable in the sense that they are genetically passed down. So it's really kind of a deception in that sense, because that word chronic, I want to show you here real quick this word chronic. If it's going to cooperate with me here. Guess it helps if I hit the right button. This word chronic. See there where it says constant, never ending, continuing for a long time, having long had a disease, habit, weakness, or the like. And in medicine it means it's used of a disease of slow progress and long continuance. And I know, look what the synonyms are of that. Constant, continual, deep-rooted, deep-seated. Look at the other underlined there. Inborn, inbred. Okay, passed on from one person to another, from the mother to the from the mother to the child, from the parents to the children. And it just continues to go. It just continues to grow, and in that sense, yes, it is a long-lasting disease. It's slow and growing. So these things are transferable. They are able to pass. They are passed down from one person to the next. In that sense, for sure. And then on the bottom here of page 22 here, where we're talking about underneath the headline where it says Christmas, Easter, Halloween are all nothing but God worship. And it shows here, it says these were the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians who moved to Rome and sent their general Titus and the Roman army to destroy the temple and move all of the artifacts to Rome, including the Book of Yahweh. Now remember, Pastor has shown us that the temple itself was actually, it was destroyed in the fact that it was dismantled, and the Sistine Chapel that actually sits in Rome now has the exact same measurements as Solomon's temple. But it shows here, he says the Roman soldiers took their orders from the chief priests of those 4 religions. These 4 religions were those prophesied in Daniel. And they moved to the 7 hills of Rome, where they became leaders of the kings of the earth, leading them into rebellion and against the laws of righteousness. And we just saw here, toward the end of the last class, we saw that in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the commandments of men. The commandments of men have superseded the laws of Yahweh in their mind. They put the laws of Yahweh, they put the worship of Yahweh aside, and they follow after these traditions. And one of those traditions that they're getting ready to participate in is the period of 40 days prior to Easter, which is known as Lent. Okay, and it shows here where these roots come from. It says it originated in the ancient Babylonian mystery religion. Okay, As remember, they brought all of these things back from Rome. All of these traditions. Go back and think about what we learned there about devil worship, the shocking facts. Everything that we learned in there, and as well as in Yahshua, did Yahshua Messiah pre-exist? The 40 days abstinence of Lent was directly borrowed from the worshippers of the Babylonian goddess. And among the pagans, this Lent seems to have been an indispensable preliminary to the great annual festival in commemoration of the death and resurrection of Tammuz. Okay, but why did the church at Rome institute such a pagan holiday? And it says here, to conciliate the pagans to nominal Christianity, Rome, pursuing its usual policy, took measures to get the Christian and pagan festivals amalgamated. In other words, amalgamated means they put them together. Okay, they merged them into one. Remember, that's what Constantine did with the Council of Nicaea. Okay, and by a complicated but skillful adjustment of the calendar, it was found no difficult matter in general to get paganism and Christianity, now so far sunk in idolatry, and that so many other things, to shake hands, or in other words, to agree. But notice what they did. Notice what they manipulated. What did they manipulate? Praise Yahweh. It was the calendar. The skillful adjustment of the calendar. You see how all that ties in? And then, Pastor, we are now getting away from that Roman calendar and doing things the way Yahweh has said it needed to be done. So this is just another step that we're coming out from among this world, as we're told to do, to come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh. Okay? So we see here their sins have reached into the firmament, into the heavens. Let me see. I forgot one thing here. After the calendar, it says the Roman Church replaced Passover with Easter, moving the pagan feast of Tammuz to early spring, Christianizing it, and Lent moved with it. But before giving up, and this is what Lent is, it says before giving up personal sins and vices during Lent, the pagans held a wild, anything-goes celebration to make sure that they got their share of debaucheries and perversities, what the world celebrates as Mardi Gras today. So they have an everything goes party before they become all holy and pious and give stuff up for supposedly 40 days, but it all comes from that ancient paganism. Okay, it has a form of holiness. It may look holy to some, but when you examine it and when you look at it and you compare it with what's written in the scriptures, it has no form of holiness in it whatsoever. Okay, and then we see that their sins have reached into the firmament, into the heavens. In Revelation 18, 3-5, it says, "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich through the abundance of her delicacies." Okay, so it's not just the merchants who sell the Christmas trees, who sell the stuffed Easter bunnies, the chocolate-covered eggs, the eggs that people stuff things in with, the Halloween mask. Yes, it's those people that benefit from it. Those merchants definitely benefit from these holidays. That's just one aspect of it. But what about what we're learning about these disease epidemics? You look at the hospitals, how the hospitals and how the doctors, and especially the pharmaceuticals, the pharmacists, the pharmaceutical companies, how they are becoming rich through the promotion of sin. I mean, if you think about it, if the laws of Yahweh were taught to the entire world, which they will be, no doubt they will be, but the world has to experience, excuse me, the world has to experience what this way of sin brings. If it weren't for sin, pharmacists wouldn't have a job. Doctors would be out of work. There would be no need for these pharmaceutical companies to exist. There's a lot of money that is made in those areas. So so it's through the defilement of the earth, through the promotion of these sins, through these unlawful sexual lusts, through those practices, and through the promotion of and the eating of unclean foods, is what brings on these sicknesses and these diseases, and it's what funds all of these other people. It's what funds the health industry. But it shows here, and then Pastor it continues there. It said, "I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, so that you do not partake in her sins, and so that you do not receive of her plagues.'" You know, we don't, by separating ourselves from the way of this world, and by separating ourselves from sin and not partaking in sin, we are not bringing these things upon ourselves. "For her sins have reached into heaven, and Yahweh has remembered her iniquities." In Matthew 24:11-12, it says, "And many false prophets will arise and will deceive the many." Remember, when the house of Yahweh was wiped out, deception was rampant because there was no one alive, there was no one there to preach the truth. For almost 1900 years, that was the case, until the house of Yahweh was reestablished, until the last day's witness was born again, until the last day's witness was born, and the house of Yahweh reestablished in the last days. "And because iniquity will abound, the love of the many will grow cold." And then Isaiah 24:5-6, "The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants of it." So yes, the earth is defiled. The earth, the land, the air, the waters. The microorganisms, everything is defiled because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, and broken the everlasting covenant. Now, that's because mankind has done these things. And because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and there will be few men left. Now, how are STDs created by man's activities on earth reaching into the heavens, causing problems in the firmament or in the atmosphere? He says, read the facts. Notice, this sickness brings sick minds that cause wars and fighting, and comes from two sources: unclean food and illegal sex acts. We just had a newsletter, not this last month, but not the current month that we're in, but the month prior. That was one of the things that this very thing was one of those things that was talked about. This unclean food and these unlawful and illegal sex acts. And you see here it says, "Oy vey," the pig tapeworm and the Orthodox Hebrew community. It says, a few months back, Carl Zimmer published a short article on the startling widespread prevalence of neurocystirosis, the larval infection form of the pig tapeworm, Taenia solium, that just so happens to infect the human brain. Okay, it shows it just so occurs to infect the human brain. It says the real trouble with this pig parasite, aside from its distressing appearance in your cerebral headquarters, is that you can acquire this even if you do not consume pork products. Okay, you don't have to eat pork to acquire this. The surprise kicker, they show here, in the summer of 1991, 3 practitioners of the Orthodox Jewish faith appeared on separate occasions in local New York City hospitals with recurrent seizures. Radiology showed evidence of brain lesions that were soon identified as cystariaceae, the larval form of the pig tapeworm that had formed protective cysts within the brain. After some epidemiological sleuthing, the culprit was soon identified. Now notice here, it says the families of these patients employed housemaids. Okay, they had employees. They employed housemaids, all recent immigrants from Latin and Central American immigrants that were infected with the adult tapeworm infection and had transmitted the infective eggs to their employers. Okay, remember, these sins don't stay within the individual. They can be passed on from one person to the next. It says, however aseptic and sanitized you live your day-to-day life, so it doesn't matter how careful you are, how aseptic, how antiseptic you are, how sanitized you live your day-to-day life. The reality is, in this generation, that we live in a world with other people who are not following Yahweh's health laws. Our co-workers, and he says here, our friends, the people who serve us food in restaurants. Did you get that? the people who serve us food in restaurants, the children that our kids play with. In short, everyone else. These things can be passed on from those individuals because they do not practice the laws of Yahweh. They do not practice the health laws that were put there to keep us safe. Says the point is, Pastor says, it makes no difference where the pigs or people are raised. The fact is that swine are carriers of parasites that are harmful to the body and the brains of man. According to modern science, these parasites cause sickness and diseases that are passed to offspring and others around you. Plus, the law given to us in Leviticus 11, 6-8, is a law to protect one's health. Okay? It's a law to protect one's health. If this law is broken, it delivers you to Satan, to whom you belong. Okay? In 1 Yochanan chapter 3, verse 4, 7 and 8, and verse 10, we're going to notice as we go through this, the next few pages here, and multiple times here during in these studies, Pastor brings this 1 Yochanan 3, 4, 7, and 8, and verse 10 out a lot. And it's there for a reason, man. It's there to get that repetition, to get it firmly established in our minds that this is the cause of these things. And it shows here, whoever commits sin transgresses the laws, for sin is the transgression of the law. That's what sin is. Let no man, little children, let no man deceive you. Don't fall into this deception. If you practice righteousness, you're righteous. But if you commit sin, substitute what sin is. If you practice breaking the law of Yahweh, he who commits this breaking of the law of Yahweh is of the devil. Romans 6:16 shows that you belong to whom you obey. And in this, in our conduct and what we do we keep these laws or do we not? Do we believe into the one sent and follow what he tells us to do, or do we not? In this, the children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are manifest. It's by our actions. Do we believe? Saying we believe doesn't mount to a hill of beans if we don't practice what we're taught. Okay? Show me your faith, Jacob said. Show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. Right? So if we believe into the one sent, then we are going to follow and do exactly what he says. You remember 2 weeks ago, it was a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned, don't go to the beach. Even before that, he mentioned not going to the beaches. He mentioned that the beaches are defiled. The beaches are nasty. They're full of filth. They are not clean. They may appear clean on the outside, on the top, but what's up underneath? What lies beneath? What's underneath the surface? And then he showed that picture yesterday of the people who decided they're going to go out walking on the beach, and they got infected with those was it hookworm? I think it was. It was some type of parasite that they got infected with, and both of their feet were inflamed. I mean, you could see how red they were, how swollen they were. I bet if it was a moving picture, you could see them moving up underneath the skin. Pastor, it gives us these things for a reason. He warned us about that, and then the article came out just a short time later saying, look, I told you about this. Now here's what these people are suffering because of what they did. Now I'm telling you, don't do these things. He's not telling us these things because he doesn't want us to enjoy life. He's doing it for our protection. We have to remember it's for our protection. These laws and these instructions are for our protection and for our health, so we can do the most important thing that we have to do, which is to stand in our place, to learn to be like Yahweh, to learn these laws, to learn this peaceful solution so that we can be of a benefit to the work and teach others how not to fall into these same things that this world is in. But notice here it says pork has been linked to brain cancer. It says cuts of pork. They do have a way to convert differently within the body system, and it says there's been a recent study that's shown that those individuals who consume pork could get a brain tumor. Yes, it has been linked to brain tumor. Well, I say that's enough reason to think twice about eating pork, and this is from Dr. Ettiman, and this was actually an article here in 2011, the 11th Roman month, the 10th day of 2011. certain facts about pork and its meat to be concerned about. And it shows here, it says, pork lives in a very different environment. Even if it's kept clean, its nature is as such. It's a dirty, filthy animal for consumption. That's why we're told not to eat it. We're told not to touch the carcass because of what it contains. The parasites it contains are harmful to the body. They're harmful to the human body. Necessary for the pig, for that pig to do its job, what it has to do, but not beneficial for mankind as far as consumption is concerned. It says there's been a recent study that has shown that those individuals who consume pork, could get a brain tumor. It's been, certain facts about pork and its meat to be concerned about. It says there are worms that have been found within its flesh and meat that do not get destroyed easily or at all, even with cooking. Okay, there's a booklet that is available, and this was one of the things that we read prior to coming to the house of Yahweh, right after we got here, was Health Yahweh's Way. And in that booklet, it outlines and shows these very things about how filthy a pig is and why it shouldn't be, why it's not fit for human consumption. And the argument, and you hear the argument, I've heard the argument before, is the whole reason that there was a prohibition against eating pork was they didn't have the way to properly cook it way back then. You remember what pastor's response to that was? Well, is fire hotter now than it was then? It's foolishness. It's foolishness. It's people rationalizing and justifying what they're wanting to do by living in this iniquity. It is highly clogging to the bodily systems and cells. What the body cannot pass through and assimilate easily will end up creating a hazard within the integrity of the cells, and that could lead to illness, disease, and even cancer. Cell mutations are as such. And notice what Pastor shows here. He says, cell mutations. Naturopathic doctors teach that your body tomorrow is what you put in it today. Now, your entire body has the ability of rebuilding itself in less than a year. Think about that. Think about it. Our body has the ability to rebuild itself entirely in less than a year. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. The body has the ability to repair itself. And if we're putting garbage in, what's that going to do? What are we going to be made of? Our body isn't going to function properly if we continue to put garbage into it. You put bad fuel in an engine, what's it going to do? It's going to run rough. It's not going to run at all. Every cell in your body can be replaced by whatever we put into our mouth to eat. Think of this. If pork is consumed, it changes or mutates cells. Those mutated cells cannot function as normal cells function. Okay, they're crippled. They can't function right. If they are and it says when you defile your body with mutated cells, if they are used by the brain, your brain suffers confusion. Small problems enlarge to unsolvable problems. You think about it. If your electrical system in the brain, if that is wired improperly, and it short circuits, how can it function properly? If you have an electrical circuit inside a building, inside a room, and it's shorted out somewhere, you go to flip on the light switch, it isn't going to work. The light may come on, it may not come on. It may come on and it might get dimmer and brighter, brighter, dimmer, brighter, dimmer. It may spark, it may start a fire. Because there's a problem with the wiring. There's a problem with the electrical system. And it's the same way with the brain. Pastor says, that's why hatred takes over the mind as it did with Cain. And it was shown in Genesis chapter 4, verse 6. It said, so Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry? Why are you downcast? Why has this come upon you? It says, but continuing in the article, it says pork has been linked to brain cancer. And it says there have been studies showing that these individuals who consumed pork meat have had aggregated red blood cells. This blood condition disrupts microcirculation and is proof of inflammatory response. Inflammation is a great factor and a cause of many diseases. Let's keep that in mind. It has been linked to cancer within the brain. Now, aggregated red blood cells. Let me see here if I can find it here. Aggregate. Let's show that here. Okay. So, to aggregate, in medicine, it means crowded or massed into a dense cluster. It means a gross amount in a mass or cluster, or together in a mass, sum, or whole. So what they're talking about is these red blood cells clump up together. Okay, kind of like cement does. You know, when you mix cement and water. You know, when you mix the cement mixture and the water, and then it all kind of clumps together, and you get these big chunks here and there. Well, it moved from those little individual particles, that sandy look, you know, that sandy feel. And once you added that water, well, what it did is it clumps everything together. Okay, and that impedes, you know, that has a problem, that causes a disruption of microcirculation. Microcirculation is the flow of blood or lymph through the smallest vessels of the body, especially as venules, capillaries, and arterioles. Now, what is microcirculation? Microcirculation is the middle part of the artery and vein, the end part of the circulation system, and it shows important components of the organ. So what you can see here, let me see if I can get it over here. So what you can kind of see here is, here you've got an artery, and this artery breaks down into a smaller branch, and that's your arteriole. And then what it does, it breaks into all these little pieces over here. Okay? And you see these little branches and stuff, these little branches over here it's part of the capillary system. And then the capillary system then goes back over here into the venules and into the veins, where it goes back to the heart. Now, it's within these capillaries that the exchange, it's where the exchange of food and oxygen take place. They're passed off to the cells that they're taking care of, and the cells that they're taking care of pass off the waste products and the carbon dioxide, and then that gets carried out, and that gets carried by the veins back through the heart and to the various organs that dispose of waste. Okay, the size of these capillaries are wide enough, just big enough to allow a single cell through. One cell. Okay? So the problem comes with this: when this pork meat is consumed, it causes this aggregation that causes these red blood cells to clump together. With these red blood cells clumped together, can they pass through those microcapillaries? Can they pass through there one at a time? No. It's like it would be like you have a clog in a drain. You know, nothing's going to get past that clog, and unless you can get that clog taken care of, your water or whatever it is not going to pass through there. Well, and that's the problem that you have there. Those capillaries get, they get clogged up to where you can't get anything to go through them. Okay, and that's what causes the inflammation. That's what causes these other diseases. Because if the stuff isn't if the food is not getting to those areas that's being serviced, what's going to take place with those cells? They're going to start dying off. Okay. So I hope hopefully that's about as clear as mud. But that's what that microcirculation is, and that's what actually takes place. But we can see here this breaking CNN. Worms can invade your brain from eating this common food. And this is from 2015. It says, with the eating of this common food, worms can invade your brain. Once they are consumed and enter your organism, they can move throughout your body, your eyes, your tissues, and most commonly your brain. Did you get that? Most commonly. The usual place this stuff winds up here, it shows, is in your brain. It's true that it's a classic parasite, but a dangerous one, and it can get into your head. And then they show here that they actually show here there was a British man in 2013, and they found they actually found a tapeworm that was in it that was in his head. And then they showed when the patient returned, he had new symptoms. The worm was now pushed through to a new part of the brain, and it started causing weakness in his legs. It started causing seizures. In fact, his condition associated with the infection sparaginosis. Upon diagnosis, the doctors had to be quick to remove the worm surgically because there is no known drug to effectively treat the infection. And nothing they can do for it. They had to go in and pull it out. Then it said the larvae can insist in the brain or any other place in the human body. These cysts can cause blindness, paralysis, tissue damage, and even death. Okay, so these little pork, these little worms inside pork, they are nasty ones. It says the tapeworm can be found in many types of forms, but 3 of them can readily infect the brain. It says it's mainly the pork tapeworm. That is the main brain. It says here. It says the first form of infection is by consuming undercooked pork from infected pigs, resulting in an adult worm residing in the intestine. The second form of the infections is in the larval form, through contact with the feces of an infected human or pig, which can go on further on infecting many tissues. It can result in a condition known as neurocysticercosis. Wow. If the larval form enters the nervous system, including the brain, this kind of infection can often cause epilepsy once inside the brain. The World Health Organization stated on this matter that almost 1/3 of epilepsy cases in countries where the disease is native are people who previously were infected by this here. And kind of give you a picture here. This is an MRI of somebody's head. And you can see where the arrows are pointing to here, and then here. That's those cysts. Okay? That's those cysts that are caused. That's the larval form of this trichina worm. That's what that is. That is a cross-section of the brain. And you can see here all of these things here. Those are cysts. That's the larval. That is the larval form of that tapeworm, and it's infected that part of the brain. Okay. So, people don't realize what they're doing when they violate that law. This is why Yahweh gave us that instruction not to eat those things. Okay? And remember, we don't have to eat it. It can be passed on from one person to the next. Okay? This is why we're told, to avoid certain practices. Now, remember the cause. This is a global curse placed on the world by the religions that teach eating the pig. Okay, it's through their teachings. It's through the teachings of the church that show, well, the pig has been cleansed. Well, according to science here, it definitely hasn't been, and the scriptures definitely show it hasn't been cleansed. And science is backing that up and proving that, and proving that over and over and over again. But we see here in Isaiah 65, 2-5, and verse 7, we see here Yahweh says, I have spread out my hands all the day to rebellious people who walk in a way which is not right after their own thoughts, after their own devices. Okay? And that's what they're doing. They're leaning upon their own understanding. They're trusting in their own heart. A people who continually act defiantly against me. And they do it openly. Well, we don't have to keep that law. That law's been done away with. There's no subtlety about it. They're defiant. They are very openly doing that. who offer sacrifices to the dead and offer their children to deadly sexually transmitted diseases, who assemble and spend the night keeping memorials for the dead, who eat swine's flesh and the broth of abominable things is in their vessels. You can see how these things infest the body, and are transported throughout the body. Who say, stand by yourself, don't come near me, for I am holier than you. These are as a stench in my nostrils and a fire that burns all the day. And your fathers have transgressed my laws together, says Yahweh, and you've burned incense upon the mountains and blasphemed me upon the hills. Therefore your reward for what you have done will be measured into your nakedness, which you have shamefully exposed. And then again here we see in Revelation 18, 3-5, where it shows all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. They are the confused from the teaching. This teachings of God worship, and we can see how that confusion comes about. It's a confusion in the teachings, and it's also a confusion due to the short-circuiting of the brain. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and again, the merchants of the earth have grown rich through the abundance of their delicacies. Look at the money that's generated by taking that MRI. Look at the money that was generated from the doctor's visits, from the visits to the pharmacy, from the surgical team that had to go in and actually try to deal with this. Look at how the people have become rich through that. And they're not saying to stop the practice. They're saying, keep doing this, keep violating these laws. There's nothing wrong with it. Keep doing it, and when you get sick, come to us and we will cure you. Okay? One of the definitions of this word back here that we saw, chronic, if I'm not mistaken, one of the definitions back there was incurable. Constant, never ending, continuing for a long time. Yep. Incurable. One of the synonyms of chronic. One of the synonyms of chronic right there. Right there. Incurable. Lifelong. So when they tell you, oh, it's okay, we can cure you, we can treat it. Yeah, they can treat it. They can hide the symptoms, but there is no curing that. There is such thing as called prevention, and the prevention comes about through obedience to the laws of Yahweh. But combine the above information with the information given by Yahweh showing the confusion that this generation is facing. In Isaiah 24, 4-6 and 19-23, it says, in verse 4 it says, the earth mourns and fades away, and the world mourns and fades away, and the haughty people of the earth languish. The haughty people of the earth, they languish. The earth is also defiled under the inhabitants of it because they've transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, and broken the everlasting covenant. Because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. This word haughty, Merriam-Webster shows us what that word haughty means. Blatantly and disdainfully proud. Blatantly and disdainfully proud. Having or showing an attitude of superiority and contempt for people or things perceived to be inferior. Okay? There's people all around that think the house of Yahweh and that think pastor is uneducated, that he's crazy, and that he's here for his own gain. There is nothing further from the truth. He's very educated. He is educated in the way that is going to bring about the cures for all of these things. And what he has in mind is seeing that these things will never come upon the earth again. He's teaching us how we can come out from among this world and from among and away from these curses to protect our very lives, to protect our health. And that's his motivation. That's what he's doing, so that we can stand in our place and help and assist in this work. But that's what this haughty. This haughty means blatantly and disdainfully proud, having or showing an attitude of superiority. This word languish. The haughty people of the earth. The haughty people of the earth, they languish. So the haughty, the proud, the arrogant, they languish. And that's word number. That is word number 535 in Strong's, and it means to be weak. The haughty people of the earth, they're weak. They droop. They're exhausted. Why are they weak? Their bodies are weak. Why? Because they continue in sin. They continue to pile one sin upon another, and upon another. They keep adding to their curses, and the bodies are breaking down. It means to grow feeble. They're growing feeble. You look at it, you can see, if you go out in the world, when we have to go out there, you can see the physical health of the people. They look like the walking dead, literally. The color, the skin color is ashen. It looks like death warmed over. According to dictionary.com, that word languish means to become or to become. All right? It means to be or to become weak, feeble, to droop or to fade. Okay? The earth mourns and fades away. Okay? They droop, they fade, they lose vigor and vitality. To undergo neglect, or they experience prolonged inactivity, to suffer hardship and distress. Their bodies are in distress. Their health is in distress. And it's all because of what's written there in verse 5. It's because they've transgressed the laws, they've changed the ordinances, and broken the everlasting covenant. That's why. They belong to whom they obey. They're obeying Satan the adversary, and following her in her rebellion against Yahweh. Verse 19 there shows the earth is utterly broken down, and the earth is dissolved clean. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth will reel to and fro like a drunkard, and will sway like a hut. This is going to be as a result of these nuclear wars. The result of these nuclear wars. The transgression in it will be heavy upon it, and it will fall, and it will not rise again. And it will come to pass in that day that Yahweh will judge the host of the high ones who are on high, and the kings upon the earth. And they will be gathered together like prisoners are gathered in the pit, and they will be shut up in the prison, and after many days they shall be visited. Then those who cleanse themselves at Abel, now notice here, those who cleanse themselves at Abel, they will be sought. They're going to be looking for you. And those who receive Yahweh's justice will be ashamed when Yahweh our Father will gloriously reign through those who think to keep all of his laws, and through the priest who teaches peace, and through the teaching of his priests. The people are going to be searching for answers. They're going to realize that they have been lied to, that they have been deceived, and that there are no cures, that the way that they've been following all these years, all of their life is nothing but lies, nothing but fairy tales. In Matthew 24:11-12, again, it shows many false prophets will arise and will deceive the many. And because iniquity will abound, the love of the many will grow cold. And again, we see here that they transgress the laws, that they transgress Yahweh's laws. Whosoever commits sin transgresses also the laws, for sin is the transgression of the laws. That's what they practice. That's what they teach. They are still transgressing Yahweh's laws, and have taken their profaneness to the whole world in the 1500 years that they had the Holy Scriptures hidden away in Rome. If you have the Yisrayl Hawkins Says program, just type in Titus or temple and read the history. From about 70 AY until the 1600s, the Holy Scriptures could not be owned. They couldn't be read, which filled the world with traditions and profaneness. Okay, and during that time, that deception was allowed to run free because, again, the people, they had nothing to compare the teachings to. It was not available. And Jeremiah 23:14 through 15 shows, I have also seen in the prophets of Jerusalem a horrible thing. They commit adultery. They walk in lies. They turn from Yahweh and follow after their gods, their Elohim. They also strengthen the hands of evildoers so that no one turns back from his wickedness. All of them are like Sodom to me, and her inhabitants are like Gomorrah. They didn't teach the laws of Yahweh. They taught sin. They taught iniquity. And they strengthen the hand of evildoers so that no one turns back from his wickedness. Therefore, this is what Yahweh our Father says concerning these prophets. Behold, they will be fed with wormwood, and they will be made to drink the water of gall, for from the prophets of Jerusalem profaneness has gone out into the whole world. Through the whole world, it came from those prophets. Those prophets of Baal, those prophets. It says, did you catch the sodomy, like Sodom and Gomorrah? That's why sodomy is taught in the schools now and in the homes by Follywood, television stars. It all comes from the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, who changed their name to Catholic after moving to Rome. And Pastor, he talks about, and he shows here, it's taught in the schools and in the homes by Follywood. Whether we realize it or not, when television is allowed to be watched, when it's watched, we are taught. People emulate. Children will emulate what they see on TV. Okay? They look, when it's presented to them, they're going to follow that way. That's the way that they're going to go. That's the way that they're going to see. That's the example that's set before them. And it most certainly is not a righteous example. And remember, the Catholic Church actually has an office over the entertainment industry. And I can't remember. I should have brought it, but I can't remember exactly under which pope that it was set up under. But they basically saw the benefit that came and how well that the entertainment industry could be used as a teaching tool. And so they use the entertainment industry to promote whatever it is that they want taught. And it has been a very, very effective teacher. But the long, strange journey of the Earth's traveling microbes. Long, strange journey. Airborne microbes can travel thousands of miles and high into the stratosphere. Now, scientists are beginning to understand the possible role of these microbes, such as bacteria, fungal spores, and tiny algae, in creating clouds, causing rain, spreading disease, and even changing the climate. You think about how long ago Pastor brought this out, how long it was that he brought this out, and now scientists are now beginning to understand. You see, they're now beginning to understand. They thought, again, Pastor was ridiculed when this was brought out, but now the studies are starting to show. The studies are coming out proving the very things that he was teaching us all those years ago. And it says, consider the African rain dance. People in tribal costumes stamping around in the ground to make rain. It's nonsense, you might say. Okay? I mean, you think about it. You ask anybody about it, what are they going to say? Well, that's a bunch of superstitious whatever. Okay? Except that we now know how it could actually work. Where's this coming from? This is coming from Yale.com. This is one of the institutes of higher learning, one of the sought-after institutes of higher learning. And they're saying, except now we know that it could actually work. They say if you had enough dancers, there may be no better way to make rain because the bugs in the soil and the surface vegetation make exceptionally, and I'm going to use their words here, exceptionally good cloud and ice condensation nuclei. And rain dances stir them up. Microbes, it turns out, are the hidden players in the atmosphere, making clouds, causing rain, spreading disease between continents, and maybe even changing climates as well. So you can see the importance of, these microorganisms. And he shows here, he says, the microbes are the most successful types of life on the earth. He says they are the unacknowledged players in many planetary processes, particularly in the atmosphere. It's time we caught up with them. At a meeting in the American Society of Microbiology, it shows here they find that high concentrations of bacteria in hailstones reported finding high concentrations of bacteria in hailstones falling on his campus. Bioprecipitation is a hot topic, and more so as we learn how much biological matter there is in the atmosphere. More than 10,000 individual bacteria per cubic meter of air over the land. Okay? 10,000 individual bacteria per cubic meter of air over the land. That's an area roughly 3 feet, a little over 3 feet by 3 feet wide, a little over 3 feet, a little over 3 feet long, and a little over 3 feet deep. And that area right there, over 10,000 individual bacteria. That's just counting the bacteria. That's not counting anything else that might be in there. You know, that's not counting viruses. That's not counting anything else, but that's just counting the bacteria. It says, these bacteria spend an average of about a week in the atmosphere, but while some stay close to the ground, others soar into the stratosphere. Weather balloons have even found them in the mesosphere up to 77 kilometers aloft. Now think about it. These things are suspended in the air over a week. You know, over a week's time. How far can that bacteria travel in that week? Okay, if you got a wind here, in Abelin, or here at Abel, you know, blowing at 25 miles an hour, how long is it going to take to reach the Metroplex? 6 hours, maybe? 7? From here to there? Okay, think about that over a week's time of how these things, of how far and how much area that they can actually cover. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. Discovering how long they stay up is difficult, but a study after the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991 found micron-sized particles, a reasonable proxy for bacteria still falling to the earth 5 years later. Okay, so 1991 is when this eruption took place, and 5 years later they're still having these particles, which are about the same size as these bacteria, falling to the earth. Now you can see how these things can globally encompass the earth. Is there a permanent stratospheric ecosystem with bacteria, fungal spores, and viruses spending their entire lives in the clouds and reproducing? I think we can talk about an atmospheric ecosystem, Griffin says. Yeah, we talked about it. He called it the firmament. It is, of course, more fluid than we classically call an ecosystem, but there is life, and it is plentiful. It is alive. The firmament is alive. Just like Pastor said. Just like he taught us all these years, and science was laughing at him, or the people were laughing at him at that time, until when? Until they started looking where he was telling them to look. Other parts of the planet we thought devoid of life, such as Antarctic ice, deep oceans, and deep rock formations, turn out to contain living organisms, so why not the stratosphere? We are constantly being rained on by detritus from around the world, from dandruff and algae to bacteria and viruses. He concluded in Science in 2005 that as much as a quarter of the aerosols in the atmosphere are of biological rather than geological origin. Some bugs bring disease, of course. Florida first reported in 1999 outbreaks of a major coral disease affecting the Caribbean coincided with dust storms. One culprit was a soil fungus that killed most of the sea fans, and it said desertification on one continent can definitely kill coral reefs on another. Presumably, dust storms crossing the Pacific from China's Gobi Desert will also be carrying pathogens. And then it talks about air sampled in 2006 over San Antonio and Austin and Texas yielded 1,800 types of bacteria, different types of bacteria. And his study was commissioned by the Department of Homeland Security as part of the research into, notice, possible bioterrorism. Okay? So if these types of weapons are used, there's no such thing as containing it to a geographical area. No such thing whatsoever. It says, this work underscores how much we don't know about the airborne bacterial populations or where bacteria come from. The potential of bioterrorism from airborne bacteria is certainly there. Griffin says that a major outbreak of foot and mouth disease and the virulent cattle infection that it may have reached England in 2001 in airborne dust. And then 1 week later, it says there were satellite images showed a dust cloud moving over the Atlantic and reaching Britain on the second Roman month, 13th day. 1 week later, foot and mouth outbreak. There was an reported outbreak of foot and mouth in the UK. Given that disease's incubation period is 7 days, he says that is one heck of a coincidence, is what he says. Okay. So, with that, man, we're going to go ahead. We'll close here on page 27. Under infectious diseases blowing in the wind. So with that, may Yahweh be with you and bless you. May Yahweh protect you this week.